Greetings and welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. Utah is a fairly unique state. It has a population of over 3.25 million people, approximately 80% who live in the greater Salt Lake City area, leaving vast expanses of the state nearly uninhabited. Approximately 62% of its residents are reported to be members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons. Utah also has a sizable Hispanic population and quite a few Pacific Islanders. Utah Department of Corrections is a government agency currently led by Executive Director Jared Garcia, who also served on governing boards for the Salt Lake Area Gang Project. The Division of Prisons operates Utah's two primary correctional facilities, Central Utah Correctional Facility and the Utah State Correctional Facility. Utah also sends more than 1,000 inmates out to county jail facilities through a jail contracting program. The Sugar House Prison, previously called the Utah Territorial Penitentiary, was located in the Sugar House neighborhood of Salt Lake City. At one time, the prison housed more than 400 inmates. In January 1852, the Territorial Assembly of Utah approved a request asking Congress to appropriate approximately $70,000 for a new territorial penitentiary. Congress appropriated $20,000 in March 1853, and plans were drawn up. The following October of 1854, Territorial Governor and Mormon leader Brigham Young collected a 10-acre government-owned site known as the Big Field, located about 6 miles from central Salt Lake City. The territorial government stated that 16 cozy cells were dug into the ground with iron bars placed on top, which comprised the original prison at a cost of about $32,000. Pretty medieval, if you ask me. And the penitentiary was opened in 1855. From 1871 to 1896, the facility was operated by the U.S. Marshals, and inmate capacity was expanded in 1875 to accommodate 300 individuals with the construction of new cell house and prison walls that were a little more humane. In 1896, the buildings and surrounding land were given to the newly created state of Utah, and it was designated as the Utah State Prison, sometimes referred to as the State Pen. In 1937, plans were approved for a new prison 22 miles south of Salt Lake City in the town of Draper. By 1941, work had begun on the site called the Point of the Mountain to replace the old aging penitentiary. However, the facility was delayed because of money and work shortages stemming from World War II. March 12, 1951, 575 inmates at the old prison were transferred by bus to the newly completed Utah State Prison in Draper. Serial killer Ted Bundy, who was featured in my true crime profile series, did time at the Utah prison facility in the mid-1970s. Bundy committed numerous murders previously in Washington state and was suspected of killings in Idaho, Oregon, and California. On August 16, 1975, Bundy was arrested by Utah Highway Patrol officer Bob Hayward in Granger, a Salt Lake City suburb, for 3 suspected murders he committed in the state. Then became a suspect in a progressively longer list of solved and unsolved homicides in other states. He was transferred to a Colorado jail where he escaped and committed 3 more grisly murders while out on the run. Finally recaptured in Florida after committing 3 more murders there before being tried in that state, found guilty, and executed. This facility operated for several decades until a 2015 special session of the state legislature voted to eventually shutter it, and it closed about 7 years later. The Utah State Correctional Facility is one of 2 prisons managed by Utah DOC and is located in the northwestern corner of Salt Lake City. It officially replaced the former Utah State Prison in Draper in July of 2022. This large prison complex houses both male and female prisoners in separate facilities, and these units range from minimum security to a supermax. But the prison quickly ran into problems.
Utah's new prison cost taxpayers more than $1 billion, yet a scathing new audit shows the new facility has been unsafe and still isn't being used as intended.
Our investigative team has been asking questions about safety and staffing. And tonight, after being granted unprecedented access, KSL investigator Daniela Rivera takes us inside this new prison with a look at what is being done to fix it and its new problems.
I've always wanted to be a part of law enforcement.
Outside of Utah, Miraniza Folk says she was discouraged from applying.
Because I'm a woman and I'm small.
Here in Utah, she decided to go for it. Folk now plays a critical role in keeping Utah's new prison functioning.
It is draining, it is tiring.
Wearing multiple hats and picking up mandatory overtime shifts.
We're patiently waiting for more staff to come in. Until then, we just have to do what we can and keep our buildings running.
Buildings that require more staff to run properly than the old Draper prison.
She's getting out soon, too.
That's because Utah's new billion-dollar facility was designed and built around what's called a direct supervision model. It places guards inside the living areas and others in a control room above, like this one. But some buildings and cells are sitting empty.
So this is the women's maximum security unit. It is currently not occupied due to staffing right now.
A scathing legislative audit found despite knowing about a recruitment and retention problem years in advance, prior corrections administrators failed to plan accordingly.
This is a problem that they knew about back in 2014.
Here, Deputy Auditor General Brian Dean shares those findings with lawmakers.
Continued operating the same way, hoping for a different result.
The KSL investigators uncovered and exposed several incidents of violence at the old Draper prison in 2022. Corrections officials told us then they hoped the new facility's layout would help cut down on violence. But data shows assaults on staff spiked following the move to the new prison that same year. In one incident, Dean tells lawmakers an inmate attacked a guard working in an area alone.
This assault, when it became almost life-threatening, the officer was handcuffed, and it was clearly visible on cameras.
But no officer was there to see it and help him. An example, auditors say, of how the direct supervision model becomes dangerous when there's not enough people to carry it out properly.
Because the design in and of itself can work with adequate staffing.
On the day our cameras filmed in this men's unit, officers and inmates interacted casually.
But then you get a taste of freedom by getting out, and you realize everything you're missing when you come back.
We absolutely need to continue to recruit people, retain them, and build a culture that people want to stay here.
Deputy Executive Director Jared Garcia sat down with the KSL investigators at the new prison to share what the new administration is doing to address safety and staffing concerns.
We're not looking backwards, we're looking forwards.
He's careful not to disparage prior leadership, but says they're doing things differently now, and the data proves it's working. Assaults on staff now trending down.
I would say from the point where the audit occurred to where we are today, there is a night and day difference.
He points to the department's staffing numbers. They ended 2021 down 64 officers overall. The end of 2022 was worse, down 66 in total. But the end of 2023, a huge increase, up a total of 160 officers.
If an incident were to happen and we couldn't get to our radios in time.
Corrections officials credit a significant boost in funding from the legislature last year, which increased starting pay from just over $20 an hour to now over $28. And a culture shift that Garcia says starts at the top, with leaders willing to innovate and listen to proposed solutions from employees.
There was potentially a culture here where those ideas would get shut down in the past, and we're quite the opposite. We're encouraging those to get passed up to us.
Garcia says they're still not able to properly implement direct supervision throughout the new prison. They're working with what he called a modified version, which auditors note does carry greater risk.
Do you worry about corrections officers and their safety given the current staffing?
100%. As a leader in law enforcement, that's always been my concern.
Learning to run a new facility with its own new problems has been challenging for officers like Folt.
Everything is completely different from Draper to here.
But she says she loves her job.
I come in with a positive attitude every day, and a positive attitude is just as infectious as a negative one.
And she looks forward to the day the work is shared among a full staff.
And that day can't come soon enough for officials, but Garcia says they are hiring regularly now and they plan to be fully staffed at some point in 2025. Mike and Deanie.
Let's hope so. Pretty eye-opening there. Danny, thank you.
Central Utah Correctional Facility, also known as the Gunnison Prison, as it is located in Gunnison, Utah, is the other main prison and houses up to 1,800 male inmates. It was completed in 1990 and houses from minimum to maximum security. Unlike the Utah State Correctional Facility in Salt Lake City, this prison is located in a rural part of the state. The prison underwent expansion in 2008, adding 192 beds, and expanded again in 2016, raising total capacity to 1,800. The first two people executed in the modern era were two Native Americans, one named Antelope and the other Longhair, who were executed at the Sugar House Prison on September 15, 1854. Prior to this time, death penalties were administered in counties where the crimes had been committed. Tickets were distributed in 1903 for admission to publicly view an execution by firing squad. From 1951 to 2022, executions were held at the Utah State Prison in Draper. But the new Utah Correctional Facility in Salt Lake City is now the only state prison used to carry out capital punishments, either by lethal injection or firing squad. There have been several riots within Utah DOC in a serious incident that occurred at the Sugar House Prison on December 3, 1945. 6 incorrigibles broke out of the disciplinary section of their cell block and released 30 other convicts. Then they broke a separating door, giving the rioters complete control of the cell block. More than 50 windows were broken. Reinforcements had to be called in from the Utah Highway Patrol and from several surrounding police agencies. This incident eventually involved 260 prisoners and is documented that it was the worst riot at that time in Utah history. After 9 hours of roaming around and breaking things, the convicts returned to their cells and officials regained control of the prison. If you recall earlier, I mentioned that in mid-March 1951, all the old Sugar House prison inmates were transferred by bus to the newly completed Utah State Prison in Draper. 2 months later, on May 20th, 1951, a major riot erupted at the new pen. In a well-organized plan, 4 guards were surrounded as convicts were returning from the cells from the recreation yard. Doors leading from the security building to the administration building were blocked by means of a large fire hose, and rioting inmates gained complete control of the main security building. But the convicts could not escape the prison's corridor, which was automatically sealed by electric locks once the riot began. Among their demands was the ousting of the deputy warden and captain of the guards. Inmates vandalized the facility, breaking nearly every toilet bowl and wash basin in the units. At 4:30 p.m., Utah Highway Patrol dispatcher Paul Keller received a call from the prison which declared all hell had broken loose, and stated that they asked for as many cars to be sent as possible. Within 15 minutes, Highway Patrol cars from all surrounding cities were en route, and more than 60 members of the Utah Highway Patrol and nearly 100 officers from the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office responded. It was found that inside, 4 guards had been taken hostage by rioting convicts, but most guards were able to escape as the riot was developing. 2 other guards had locked themselves into a second-story room but could not get out. Prisoners used a table as a battering ram in an attempt to beat down the door to the room they were in. Several convicts confined to death row threatened to kill all the hostages if it became necessary. The 2 trapped guards ripped sheets into strips and made a rope to get away. Inmates also gained access to the prison hospital, and all the narcotics in the pharmacy were looted and distributed among rioting prisoners. This is a similar situation as to what happened during the 1980 Santa Fe riot in New Mexico, although multiple inmates were killed in that case, which will be covered in this series soon.
Some of the inmates had had some alcohol and goofballs and happy pills, and we found it quite difficult to cope with them.
Whacked out on drugs, the Utah inmates went berserk and destroyed everything they could get their hands on, including electrical control panels, which left the facility in entire darkness. Outside officers surrounded the prison and turned on their vehicle headlights for loss of electricity and no lights. Officers armed with shotguns, handguns, submachine guns, and tear gas then started to enter the facility. Following a 4-hour standoff, rioting prisoners returned to the cells. On February 6, 1957, 5 Utah State Prison convicts stabbed Lieutenant M.L. Coleman during a late-night basketball game.
This morning's top story is in the making right now at Utah State Prison at Point of the Mountain, Utah. A riot in Utah. 500 convicts took part in the riot, which began last night.
I understand this disturbance lasted all night, and none of the 18 men released at 5 a.m. in the morning, who were from the Latter-day Saints church basketball squad at nearby Granger, had been injured. Hostages proceeded from cell blocks, led by 2 convicts, armed robbers Billy Randall and Joey Valdez, who turned over to authorities weapons they had secured. Randall carried a machine gun and handed it to guards, then gave the officer additional ammunition for the weapon. He then calmly opened his jacket and took a revolver out of his belt and opened the chamber to show there were 5 bullets in the pistol and surrendered it. This release and relinquishing of weapons happened about a half an hour before Random and Valdez were able to talk to the news media to air their grievances. And a score of prison officers moved throughout the prison to extinguish the riot that lasted 14 hours and did approximately $50,000 in damage. One of the main issues by the hostage takers was cooking procedures in the kitchen and feeding inmates within the prison.
We have a bookkeeper out here that tells us how to cook our food. I'm a dinner cook. I have the responsibility of cooking for the inmates of this institution, and it's pretty hard to do having a clerk come back here and tell us how to cook beans, which is our main meal. The other night we ran out of potatoes. We had to serve cold potatoes on the main line for the felons.
The leader of the rioting group in this case was inmate Theodore Keener, who was one of the inmates who had stabbed Lieutenant Coleman the previous day. Sergeant Nick Thomas stepped forward, drew his .357 Magnum revolver, and announced, "Step past that door and you're dead." Deputy Warden John W. Turner stepped to Sergeant Thomas's side and said, Now, Nick, we can talk this over." And Sergeant Thomas told the deputy warden, "That's the problem with your prison. Too much talk and not enough doing." One of the other clowns yelled to the riot leader, "Keener, you better turn around. I think he means what he says." And Keener backed down, and that riot was over. There have been quite a few other riots and serious disturbances within Utah DOC in recent years. A grainy 2020 video captured by surveillance cameras at the state prison in Draper showed cell doors popped open, and seconds later, fighting started. Utah Department of Corrections refused to hand over the surveillance video in response to public records media requests, but some of the footage was shown in open court. An incident from January 7, 2020 showed a brawl between 8 men belonging to 2 rival gangs. I believe they were Serenos and Norteños. Later, men on both sides of the fight would blame the state for putting them in this situation and claim they acted in self-defense. I guess Utah began allowing rival gangs to mingle in prison, called reintegration, even though many warned that there would be violence. Surveillance video of another fight between gang members the following month captured a similar scene. These incidents evidently occurred after a 2019 by prison officials to end their practice of keeping these 2 rival gangs apart. The department stated they had a policy that allowed any inmate that has a safety concern to notify staff if they feel they're in danger and need protection. But this is often known as snitching, and so often offenders do not want to drop a kite and make it seem like they're afraid. They also will sometimes manipulate the system and state that they can't go out with certain individuals so that they get to come out with their homeboys. These are the kinds of things that people that worked in corrections are very well aware of, but the public often doesn't understand. In August 2023, a large brawl at the Central Utah Correctional Facility in Gunnison occurred. The Utah Department of Corrections said this fight involved 15 inmates, and 5 of the inmates were transported to a local hospital for treatment of their injuries. This brawl also appeared to be gang-related. So I'll have to stop right here for now, but I'll come back soon to cover more on the Utah Department of Corrections. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.